Last year I walked out of a coin shop with a receipt that didn't make sense. The price I paid was far enough below the number on the board that I checked it twice in my car to make sure they hadn't made a mistake. They hadn't. 10 minutes later, a guy behind me bought the exact same coin at full ask. Same shop. Same day. Same inventory. The difference between his transaction and mine wasn't luck. It wasn't charm. And it definitely wasn't me pounding the counter demanding a discount. It was 4 small things I did before I even walked through the door. I didn't always know them. The first time I tried to negotiate on gold, I walked into a shop, pointed at a 1-ounce American Eagle, and asked, "Can you do any better on the price?" The dealer looked at me for about 2 seconds, looked back down at his paperwork, and said, "No." Not rude. Not hostile. Just no. I bought it at full ask. Walked out. Sat in my car. And I had this strange feeling like I had just failed a test I didn't know I was taking. What I didn't understand then, and what changed everything once I figured it out, is that he wasn't telling me negotiation was impossible. He was telling me I hadn't given him a reason to say yes. That distinction is everything. Once I understood that, I stopped asking for better prices, and started getting them. Let me show you what changed. And I'll also tell you about the parking lot mistake that cost me real money, because that lesson was even more expensive. Know the number before you walk in. The first tactic is so simple it's almost embarrassing. Know the spot price before you walk through the door. Not roughly. Not around 20-something hundred. Know it within a few dollars. Spot price is the baseline. Everything above it is premium, and premium is where negotiation lives. The first time I walked into a shop already knowing the exact spot price, something subtle shifted. The conversation felt different. You stop being a buyer. You become someone who understands the market. I've had dealers voluntarily tighten pricing the moment it was clear I knew the number. It takes 30 seconds on your phone, and it changes the dynamic immediately. But knowing spot price is just table stakes. The next shift is where things actually started moving. Quantity changes the math. Walking in for one coin puts you in the weakest possible position. Margins on a single coin are thin. There's not much room to move. But the math changes with even modest quantity. 3 coins. 5 coins. 10. Now there's flexibility. Here's the mistake I made for a long time. I'd walk in and say, "I want 5. What's your best price?" That's the wrong move. Instead, establish you're serious. Ask what their premium structure looks like on larger purchases. And let them give you the first number. The first number is almost never their best number. Once they anchor, you have something to work with. The first time I handled this correctly, the premium dropped enough that I remember thinking, "I've been overpaying for a year." And that was a good lesson. The next one was not. The parking lot lesson. Private sellers are where the most interesting deals happen. They're also where the most expensive lessons happen. I once met a seller in a grocery store parking lot. The price was well below dealer retail. He had a reasonable story. Needed quick liquidity. Estate situation. The coin looked right. Weight was right. Magnet test was fine. I told myself, this is what a deal looks like. It wasn't. A week later I had it properly tested. It was a very convincing fake. Not cartoonishly bad. Not obvious. Just good enough. That coin still sits in my desk drawer. I keep it there on purpose. It reminds me that a deal on gold you cannot confidently authenticate is not a deal. It's speculation. After that, I changed my rule completely. If I cannot verify it beyond doubt, I walk away. I have passed on incredible looking prices since then. And I've slept very well because of it. Private sellers can be excellent opportunities. But only if you bring verification with you. Otherwise, you're not negotiating. You're gambling. Pawn shops, a different game. Sometimes their gold pricing is sharp. Sometimes it makes absolutely no sense. I've walked into one shop pricing common bullion above coin dealer retail. 2 weeks later, I found another shop selling below melt because they needed case space. The tactic here isn't aggressive negotiation. It's frequency. Volume of visits. You don't hunt pawn shops once. You check them consistently. Because occasionally, inventory mismatches create opportunity. And when that happens, the negotiation is usually easier. Because expertise asymmetry works in your favor, if you've done your homework. The strategy that outperformed everything. There's one thing that has outperformed every individual tactic I've mentioned. And it takes the longest to build. A real relationship with a good local dealer. I have a dealer now who calls me when something interesting comes in. Who gives me pricing I know isn't what a random walk-in gets. Who I trust enough to move quickly when the right piece shows up. That relationship took about 2 years. Half a dozen transactions. Consistency. And here's the irony. The best pricing I get today isn't because I negotiated harder. It's because I didn't. I was informed. I was reasonable. I was predictable. Long-term games with long-term people almost always outperform one-off wins. And that's the real shift. Yep. If you remember nothing else, know the number. Buy in ways that create flexibility. Never skip authentication. And think long-term. The guy behind me in line that day probably thought I got lucky. I didn't. I just stopped walking into coin shops unprepared. What's the best deal you've ever gotten on gold, and where did you find it? Dealer? Pawn shop? Private seller? I'm genuinely curious, because I'm always looking for edges I haven't thought of yet. Drop it in the comments.